One of the biggest selling points of the Borderlands series since its inception, and what originally got me interested as a kid in Borderlands 1, is all the different types of weapons and abilities you can use. I still remember when I was young being in awe at the idea of a game that had millions of guns you could use, with certain specific shields or weapons spawning for less than 1% of players, meaning if you were lucky enough, you could find something that almost no one else had. I just find it to be a really compelling carrot on a stick even to this day, and it makes build crafting in this series so fun because you know at any point a new legendary could spawn which could completely change how you play. And well, Borderlands 4 does a great job here too. First of all, there is a huge variety of loot to find here once again, including brand new weapon manufacturers and many returning favorites that all combine together using a new system of parts. How it works is that every weapon in Borderlands 4, especially at the higher levels, can spawn with up to 4 different licensed parts. You might find, say, a Tediore gun that can be thrown to explode that also has a Jacob's barrel that ricochets critical shots, and a Ripper magazine that you must hold down to charge up before firing full auto. All the different mixing and matching of the part system allows for an even greater variation from previous titles, but at the same time, I will say it didn't quite add as much difference as I originally thought it would. Don't get me wrong, for the most part, I like the idea, and it's done well for an initial implementation, but I would love to see even more manufacturer parts for each section of a gun that allow for really crazy and overpowered combinations. Because as it stands, usually when I see a gun with, say, an Order magazine, for example, I just sigh because I know I will have to hold down the trigger to fire and burst, and I just personally don't like weapons like this in an FPS, as it results in a lot of useless loot. In Borderlands 4, for example, a lot of parts for different sections of the guns are way more impactful than others, meaning if you get a specific part in a specific section, it will always kind of overwrite everything else going on and either make you love or hate the weapon. Still though, in principle, these changes are good and mean every piece of loot you find has at least a chance at being fantastic. More than any other Borderlands game before, I was checking every item dropping from enemies, because even the greens and blues had a chance at spawning with ridiculously powerful combinations of parts, whereas in previous titles you basically only paid attention to something if it was either legendary or purple in the late game. In fact, I think this could be massively improved too if Gearbox actually unlocked more of the weapons and legendary drops to allow for even more combinations or types of roles, making the loot grind much harder as finding the perfect piece of gear would be nearly impossible, but for me, that's the whole point of playing games like this in the first place. I love when an amazing legendary, for instance in Diablo, drops at only a 1% rate, and that drop could have one of thousands of different combinations of stats, meaning getting a really good one is so impossible that actually finding one that's decent is euphoric. That's the kind of chase that makes games like this fun, those wild combinations we dream of, and Borderlands 4 has the potential to be best in class with just a couple small tweaks and additions. And this is only further exacerbated too by the new firmware system. This is a new addition to Borderlands 4 where, especially late game, you will find lots of pieces of gear that not only roll for stats and manufactured parts, but also have a chance to come attached with one of the many new firmwares. These upgrades of sorts give your character some very impactful bonuses that increase with power the more gear you have with the same firmware. So for example, every character has 5 slots of gear that they can use firmware on. Basically anything that isn't a gun, think shields, ordnance, class mods, enhancements, and rep kits. If you have more pieces of gear with that specific firmware, you get more bonuses, up to a max of 3. So on my Rafa playthrough on PC, for instance, I kept hunting for a firmware called GUFC, which lowered my action skill cooldown and gave it some extra damage, which was a huge boost to the power of my build. This means now, late game, you aren't just farming for the single best weapon and shield you can find, but you're also looting through every blue or even green and white item to find firmware upgrades that might make your character better. It's a genius change in my opinion, and essentially has brought things like set items from competitors to Borderlands, which I think is a welcome addition, and makes the grind for loot late game, even after the campaign, so great. Speaking of late game as well, Borderlands 4 has introduced UVH, or Ultimate Vault Hunter mode, which allows you to increase the game's difficulty and find better loot by completing a set of challenges, aka beating a previous mission with new modifiers, or fighting and defeating vault monsters and bosses with souped up powers. In my opinion, it's a great way to handle endgame, and for me at least, has kept me happy and interested in improving my characters step by step. And in addition, it lends itself to easy additions with DLC and future content updates where new raid bosses could be a thing you have to defeat to reach higher levels of UVH, and those higher levels could include new gear, new enemy types, new regions, and a whole host of modifiers that change up the game. Another cool idea would be adding firmware that can go up to higher levels, like say a level 5 firmware that's really rare, and if you get all your pieces with it, you become a god. And by the way, that's not even to mention the addition of specialization trees, where even after hitting max level, you will be gaining XP to acquire new power-ups, essentially an entirely new skill tree each character can use to refine their build. The in-game setup definitely needs some work as of release, like some more interesting challenges in UVH more akin to what I suggested, or more truly difficult bosses, but for the most part, the actual structure behind the in-game and all the options afforded to you are fantastic. I've been loving my time playing Borderlands 4 even past level 50 just as much as the run-up. And by the way, that's not even touching on the absolutely fantastic skill trees this time around that are awesome. You see, each Vault Hunter gets to pick from 3 different expansive skill trees where you can assign a point every time you level up, and it vastly changes how you even play one character. For example, the main Vault Hunter I played on PC, Rafa, has an action ability called Peacebreaker Cannons that I loved using, which allows you to simply hit a button as turrets prop up on your shoulder and fire at everything on sight. Even in just this one action from a single skill tree on a single character, there was so much variety. I could get modifications that allowed my cannons to crit constantly, others that gave me regenerating ammo, some that caused massive fireball explosions or shot rockets, and even one that let me strip the turrets off my back and use them as a more traditional stationary machine gun on the ground that shoots grenades I have equipped. Even with just one skill tree, there are so many different ways to play and alter your style, and I personally think in games like this, that's so important. Solid and fun gameplay can't carry you through thousands of hours on its own. You need something else too. And in the case of Borderlands, instead of that being competitive multiplayer and a ranking system, it's the best skills and character progression the series has seen by a long shot. I mean, even smaller things too, like how you refight bosses and grind for loot is so much better here. With the new Moxie's Big Encore machines, you simply just walk your way to a boss zone once now, and then can endlessly fight them over and over again in search of better loot. In-game also consists of weekly hardcore versions of these bosses with better loot, as well as hidden vending machines and a repeatable quest with big rewards. And when you combine this all together, the actual process of finding new upgrades and theory crafting about how to improve your character during and after the campaign is a true joy. And we already know they're going to be adding 2 more Vault Hunters on top of the 4 we already have, which means there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of hours to be spent playing this game just thinking about what skills you want to take. I cannot express just how much fun I had and am having figuring out builds and upgrading each of my characters, as even one good class mod, shield, ordnance, or weapon can completely change how you play. However, all of this glowing praise aside, there is one huge issue with this entire setup right now, something that as of writing this at least, greatly affects every aspect.